Nehemiah is trying, of course, to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. It hasn't been simple. It hasn't been easy. There have been people who have tried their hardest to deny that, and but yet the success is still there. They're still successful so far. And that's where we continue in our chapter with another plot to try to stop the wall. Vayhi cha'asher nishma lisana valat v'tovia l'geshem ha'avi uliyeter oivenu vanita etachop ad ha'etahid latot lohem aribasharim. So now he continues and he says, when Sanvalat and Tovia and Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that we had rebuilt the wall and there were no more holes, there were no more breaches in it, right? At that time, I had not yet set up the doors and the gateways, but there was no way for them for an enemy to come easily into the wall. Vaishlach Sanvalat v'Geshem Elai lemor lecha v'niv ada yachtav b'kefirim b'vikat ono v'hema choshvim lasot lira. So I got a message from Sanvalat to Geshem. They said, "Come and meet with us in Kfirim in the Ono Valley." It's still today, Kiryat Ono in Israel, and but Nechemiah realizes that they wanted to harm him. They wanted to do something to him. That, this was not just an attempt at reconciliation of some sort. He understands that they that they are plotting against him, and that they want to kill him, whatever it is that they might want to do, want to imprison him. I think back not too long before this, but to the time of Gedalia, Yirmiyahu, he's warned by others not to get together and then to be careful with Yishmael, and he doesn't listen, and of course he is assassinated. But Nechemiah is not easily fooled. Continuing in verse 3, Pasuk Gimel, V'eshlecha lehem melachim lemor, melacha gedola ani oseh v'lo uchal laredet. And what does he say? He sends messengers to them, I've got too much work. I don't have time. There's too much work for me to do to be able to come down into the valley. Lama tishvat bat hamlacha kasher arpeh v'yaradati aleichem. I can't go down to you because then I would have to stop the work, and therefore I can't do it. And he says they sent him a message telling him to come, and he said no. And 4 times this went on. They sent him a message. He said no. Now it's the 5th time, and Sanvalat sends the same message, but this time with his servant who had an open letter with him. Katuv ba, and it was written as follows. We're in verse 6, Pasuk Vav. Bagoyim nishma v'gashmu omer ata v'hayudim choshvim limrod al kein ata voneh choma v'ata hovel lahem lemelech kadvarim ha'ela. And it said, word has reached the nations, and Geshem too says that you Jews are planning to rebel. And that's why you're building the wall. And you're going to proclaim yourself or be proclaimed as king. This is the rumor. This is what is going around town, showing him this letter. Now we think back earlier, not that long ago, in the book of Ezra. Ezra talks about how the Samaritans, who didn't want the Jews by themselves to build a temple about 80 years or 90 years earlier than this, they accused the Jews of rebelling. And Cyrus looks into the records and he sees that the Jews have been a rebellious people, which is, as I said back then, a hallmark of our people. We will not just be like everybody else. We have to keep our own laws, our own traditions, our own values. And so here the accusation of the Jews being a people who want to rebel is one that can be believed, that such a rumor would be around. He continues in verse 7, V'gam niviim he'emadata l'kro alecha v'Yerushalayim le'mor melech bihuda v'yata yishma melech hadvarim ha'ela v'yata lechu v'niv'atza yachtav. And also you have prophets in Jerusalem who are proclaiming there's a king in Yehuda and Judea, and these things are going to reach the king. They're going to eventually make their way all the way back to Babylon, all the way back to Artaxerxes, and there are going to be problems. And so we should get together to plan how to deal with this. Veshlachai lav lemor. Lonia kadvarim ha'ela asher ata omer, ki libcha ta boda'am. And then Nechemiah says back, this is ridiculous. This is not true. None of these things have occurred. This is your own imagination. This is your lying. Ki chulam miyareim otanu lemor yirpu yideim min amlacha v'lo teaseh v'ata chazek et yadai. And why are you doing this? Because you're trying to get me to stop with the work. You're trying to get me to stop and leave it alone. Chazek et yadai, strengthen my hands. I'm going to continue to work. Vanivati beit Shemaiah ben Delaiah ben Mahei Tavel v'hu atzur. And now he says, after this episode of the 5 times that Sanballat has sent him messages to try to lure Nechemiah into a trap, I visited Shemaiah, the son of Delaiah, the son of Mahatavel. Vayomer nivaed el beit Elohim el toch ha'echal v'niskarad latot ha'echal ki ba'im la'argecha v'layla ba'im la'argecha. And what does the Shemaiah who Nechemiah comes to visit? Shemaiah says to him, we need to go. Let's get together. Let's meet in the house of God in the Beit HaMikdash. We'll go into the sanctuary. We'll shut the doors, right? We'll go into the Kodesh, the holier parts, because this way we'll be protected, because tonight they are coming to kill you. Tonight, whether that be, presumably the Sanballat's people, okay? And this is what Shemaiah, who Nechemiah has come to visit, tells him. I said, I'm not going to run away. I'm not scared. And furthermore, I'm not allowed to go into the Heichal. I'm not a Kohen. I'm not allowed to go into those sections of the Beit HaMikdash. I'm not going to go in. I won't be able to live. Va'akira v'hine lo Elohim shilacho ki anivua diber alai v'tovia v'sanvalat secharo. And what does Nechemiah say? I realized that this guy was not a prophet. We're at the time of the end of prophecy of Malachi. The previous prophets, Haggai and Zechariah, lived 67 years earlier. I don't know how long they would have passed away, presumably before the life of Nechemiah. If not, they're very, very old. So there could be still some waning prophecy that's going on. But he says, I realized the Shemaiah, and think of his name, Shemaiah, I heard, right? Shammai heard, I heard God. He says, I realized this was not prophecy. This was Sanballat and Tovia had hired him. They bribed him to get me to go into the Beit HaMikdash, to get me into a position where it's going to look like I am overstepping my authorities, and I'm taking on maybe a role of kahuna in addition to being, the governor. And so that's what they're doing at Leman. He says in 13, Pasuk Gimel, Leman sachur hu, Leman ira ve'aseh kain v'chatati. And why were they doing this? Right? They hired him, they paid him to intimidate me and to get me to sin. I would be scared. I'd run into the Beit HaMikdash and I would sin, and then there would be a scandal about me, and then they could, they could say terrible things about me, about my name. They could blaspheme me. And so he says over and over again, there are many, many plots. There have been many attempts to get the Jews to not be able to, 75, 80 years earlier, 90 years earlier, build the Beit HaMikdash. And now all of these plots, all of these plans to deny the people to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, to have a secure city. And hope is, with a secure city, a much more prosperous city. And perhaps as the fear of the other nations, the Jews, get more prosperous, then perhaps they will suffer as a result. Continuing with Pasuk Yadal, verse 14, he says sort of like he said in the last chapter, Zachra Elohai letovia ulesanbalat k'ma'asa ve'ele, v'gam leno'adia hanevia uliyeter haneviim asher hayu miyarim oti. God, remember what Sanballat and Tovia, their deeds, their terrible deeds, and also Noadiah the prophetess, and against the other prophets that they wished to intimidate me. So it looks here, a couple of interesting things here, that there is an understanding that may have been more unique. So maybe that's why she's pointed out, but there are female prophets. These are, of course, false prophets like Shemaiah here and no Adiyah, again with that Yud Hey in the end, right? No Ad, God has come to me and God has informed me. But we have here. It's interesting just to think about that we have that idea of a female prophet, but these are false prophets. Now, if they didn't believe in female prophets, there could not have been a female false prophet, of course. Vatishlam hachoma be'esrim v'chamisha le'elul l'chamishim u'shnayim yom. The wall was finished on the 25th of Elul after just 52 days. The wall was completed. All of the breaches were filled. Vayhi kasher shamu kol oivenu v'yir'u chol hagoyim asher sevivotenu v'yiplu ma'od be'enehem v'yedu ki me'et Eloheinu ne'esta hamlacha hazot. And so when our enemies and all the nations around us heard about it, right, they were intimidated, and they no longer had the strength and the desire, the ability, or they no longer felt that they could damage us and destroy the rebuilding of Jerusalem, the fortification of the city. And why? Because it happened so quickly. They understood, they believed that it must have been only through the help of God. Gam bayamim ahem, we're in Pasuk Yud Zayin, verse 17. Marbim chorei Yehuda igrotehem, holchot al tovia v'asher latovia ba'ot aleim. Also in those days, the nobles of Judah, they were corresponding with Tovia and Tovia with them. Ki rabim bihuda ba'alei shvu'a lo, ki chatanhu l'shechanya ben Arach v'Yehonatan beno lakach et bat Mishulam ben Berechia. There are complications here because many in Yehuda were aligned with him because he was the son-in-law of Shechanya, the son Arah, and his son Yehochanan had married the daughter of Mishulam, the son of Berechia, and so it wasn't so simple to sideline him. Gam tovotav hayu omrim lefanai udvarai motziim lo igrot shalach tovia lirireni. And they would also speak well of him to me and would divulge my affairs to him. Tovia sent letters to intimidate me. So already saying here that over and over again, in every which way they could, there were attempts to discredit me, attempts to trap me, attempts to get me to be fooled. Corrupt religious figures like Shemaiah, who are bribed, and if Nechemiah went and visited him, he must have been at some point a respected religious figure. Nechemiah here does not fall for any of their plans. He's worried about the public disgrace of going into the temple, but he's able to stand up very, very strong, and with both even the external threats and even the internal threats, the deceptive invitations, the false accusations, right? He prays and he turns to God, and there is an incredible commitment that he has, and it works. And in a very, very short period, the walls are built. And so it's a very, very successful chapter here. It's a little sad to see the enemies within, but sometimes that's unfortunately what happens as well. But Nechemiah stays strong. God has Nechama, has consolation on Jerusalem, and the walls of Jerusalem are built, and the city is further fortified, and it seems like things are looking up for the second Beit HaMikdash.